a very happy topic, but it's one of those things that we need to have conversations about. And today we're talking about the increasing rate of suicide in Nigeria. Now, there's been a bit of a lot of bad news, really, when it comes to people who are taking their lives as a result of the struggles that they are going through mentally. Now, in Nigeria, the age standardized suicide rates in 2019 was put at 6.9% per 100,000. And this article that I read actually goes on to list some of the other countries around the world that have the highest suicide rates. Now, what is shocking is that six of the countries with the highest suicide rates in the world are in Africa.
Yeah.
Now, a report from Punch newspaper exactly 1 year ago did state that 79 people took their lives in 2022. 79 people, 70 males and 9 females. And of course, this is the number of reported suicide. Now, due to sometimes cultural reasons or religious reasons, some of these cases go unreported. But from that report, reported cases, in 2022, 79 Nigerians took their lives. Highest number came from Lagos State, and that was followed by Oyo, and then Kano, Anambra, Edo, and Delta states. So that's like the distribution of the states with the highest suicide rates in Nigeria. Now, let's just welcome our guest this morning. Aishah Adams is a therapist, she's a coach, and she's a counselor as well. Good morning, Aisha, and welcome back to Lagos Talks.
Welcome. Good morning. Sorry.
All right. So I just want to give a few stats about the people that we've lost recently.
Okay.
Just 3 days ago, a 72-year-old man, a retired soldier in Benue State, took his life.
Hmm.
On the same day, in Kano State, a 37-year-old security guard took his life. Now, the report is he took his life after he heard about his ex-wife getting remarried.
Hmm.
Just 2 days ago, a 24-year-old student in a university in Adamawa State took her own life as a result of a relationship that had gone south.
Oh.
And early this year, this was something that sort of made the news. A young lady here in Lagos, a banker, 32 years old, took her life at work. She left behind a suicide note apologizing to her parents, and she lists some people, possibly people that she loves, apologizing to them for the decision that she took. Um, what factors really, Aisha, are contributing to this rising rate of suicides in Nigeria?
Honestly, definitely the first that comes ready to mind is the culture of shaming. So, stigma, the way we stigmatize people for the things that they go through, which makes it hard for them to want to open up, to share their problems. It's like you have issues that you're dealing with and you can't find the solutions or readily available to you. And although you want to seek help, but you are worried that if you speak out, people will start to mock you, or they will start to even make you feel worse than what is really going on in your life. And then there is the part of isolation. Although we are living in a very connected world at the moment, there is still a lot of disconnectedness. How many times do you sit in a gathering and you find people just on their phones? It's like, come on, do you understand? It's like you left home to come to this gathering. Can you at least, be present? So people are not often present in those gatherings. And so there's the issue of isolation. There is also, physical illness and chronic pain. There are people that constantly are in pain. And it's tiring. I was actually speaking to someone, I think recently, and the person was like, you know what? I'm tired of constantly being in pain, you know? And so there are those kinds of illnesses that make you constantly in pain. And you're just like, you know what? If I end it, this pain will be over. And then there is the family history. We can't rule that out because there are some people with family histories of suicide, and people with family histories of suicide have their children having a 500% more chances of actually committing suicide.
Wow.
So that's why we always talk about childhood trauma and how it's so important for you to heal yourself, because when we talk about therapy and the role of counseling and all of that, people will say things like, oh, but in Africa, we don't need it. Thank God you just talked about statistics, and Africa has one of the highest, cases of suicide. And it's because obviously we are low income, middle income, countries. Those countries have, in fact, 8 in 10 cases of suicide are usually from low income, middle income countries. And so that tells you that we who claim to not need the therapy are more in need of it than anybody else. So this, I always call it the Sean Bruce Lee. This attitude of it's me that I can suck in pain the most. It's not helping anybody, and it's only showing up in the suicide cases that you're seeing more. It's not that people don't like, between 25 to 50% of people actually tend to have suicidal thoughts. So it's not like it's not abnormal, because sometimes you're just in that place where you're thinking. I'm sure people listening will say, "Oh, actually, it has crossed my mind." I doesn't talk
Wow.
about it. So people have it cross their mind. To cross your mind and leave, okay, that's good. It's not good, but you get my point. It's better.
Mm.
But then to act on it, then there is an issue, and the issue usually will be probably because your prefrontal cortex is, has low energy. And another thing that could lead to having low energy in your prefrontal cortex would be alcohol intake. If you observed, when the brewing companies are still hitting it, they're in fact making the most money at the moment, and it's because people think that the way to ease, in quotes, out of stress, rather than go for the old-fashioned therapy that we keep recommending and shouting about, is to, you know what, I'll just go and drink pepper soup and take a bottle of drink. What that does is that most of the suicide cases observed, you would notice that there are people, they were drunk at the time they did it. And so what the alcohol does is that it lowers your brain function. So you're not thinking, because your prefrontal cortex, the job of the prefrontal cortex is to help you organize, is to have, empathy, planning, focus. And so when it is low energy, what happens? It means that things are more likely to slip through, and you're more likely to take actions that you will regret. Because what is suicide? Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. At that point, when your prefrontal cortex energy is low, what is happening is like you're not able to think straight. You're not focusing, think about it. So you're just in the now. You're living right now. It's like, oh my God, it's too overwhelming. Let me just end it. That's all you're thinking about.
Wow.
And so that's where the role of family comes in. Because if you don't have good support system, then that's another, risk factor, because you have family around you, but you guys are constantly, at loggerheads, or then there are trust issues. And I think at this point, I need to, speak to parenting, because, parenting in Africa, I'm not going to go down the lane of trying to condemn anybody, but I'm just going to say that as much as we're trying to discipline our kids, it's important that we give room to the children to actually have us as friends that they can come to when they have issues. And I say this because adolescents and teenagers have been seen to have that the second leading cause of death amongst adolescents and teenagers is actually suicide. So this means that we need to take our, like, teen years, take them seriously between the ages 15, to 35. It's a very key reason why these people tend to die at those ages.
Now,
And
looking at the statistics of
yeah,
people that took their lives just this year that have been publicized in the media, three of those people actually fall in that age bracket.
so that just confirms what the statistics says, because this is research based. This is what the research shows. It shows, in fact, across the world, it's a second leading cause of death amongst teenagers, amongst adolescents. Think about it. Teenagers are years where you're just really very positive about life. You have these dreams. And when things are not going well, if you have not been taught to build your resilient muscle, and thoughts is because when you're young, you start to build a muscle through being given opportunities to take challenges, do things by yourself. You fail at it, you tell them to try it again. Because parents have this thing of rushing in and taking over the day. Come on, let the children. They learned to walk. The process of walking took a lot of falling and falling and falling. But guess what? Because you gave them that opportunity, they finally were able to get their act together, and they were finally able to walk. But then when things, small challenges, you're like, oh no, he's a child. A child at 10? Really? I'm not saying that he's not a child, but there are things that you should allow them to do to build their resilient muscle, to build that muscle. Because if they don't, then it's going to affect them when they're older, because they would start to see life as easy peasy. If it's not easy, then it is not worth it.
Okay, so Aisha, what is the difference between a person who has suicidal thoughts and then is able to push those thoughts away from their minds, and a person who has those thoughts and acts on those thoughts?
The person who acts on the thoughts is probably someone who has low energy in their prefrontal cortex, like I said earlier. And the person who is able to push it aside is usually thinking through, it's like, okay, this thought has
Isn't
come.
even having those thoughts a symptom of a problem?
Not really, because the way we deal with issues are different. Some people feel easily overwhelmed. And some people, that's why I said, between the 25 to 30, 50% of people, and that's a lot of people having suicidal thoughts. It crosses their mind. So that's what research has shown, that it crosses their mind. So crossing your mind, I'm not saying it is good, but I'm just saying that it's not abnormal. It's not being diagnosed or written as abnormal by professionals. They're not like, oh, you know what, once you have the thought, then no. Well, if you have the thoughts, and I'm sure people listening can agree with me, a lot of people have said, you know what, I've heard people say things like, I thought it was the end. I was really having thoughts about killing myself. And again, I go back to the culture of shaming, blaming, complaining, stigmatizing people for things that they go through. And this is is a chronic problem in Africa. Again, it speaks to the statistics. Someone tells you, you know what, I've been raped. And then in other countries, you have support groups, right? In Africa, you stigmatize the person and make her think. You groups. Condemn and you start to ask, what did she do? What did she not do? How did she get there? And all kinds of stuff. A person is raped at 5. What question are you really asking a 5-year-old or a 12-year-old that was raped? But these are things that happen. And because sometimes, in our parenting, we are so strict that we do not give our children the opportunity to voice out what is happening to them. So they have nowhere to turn. The rapist has threatened and said, if you tell anybody, I am going to kill you. The child is scared, but they don't have anybody to come talk to because you have created a wall in your bid to look like, Hitler. Because you do not need to be Hitler in your home with your children. So as much as you're trying to discipline them, there should be, the thin line between, discipline and, there should be some love, there should be friendship, there should be love, not even some love, because your relationship with your children should be unconditional love. But I don't know, somehow, how we were raised and some things that bad habits we picked up when we're growing up is how a parent says, you're only loved when you do well in school. You're only loved when this happens to you. You are only worthy of my love when that happens. Come on. Go look at the studies on dysfunctional children. Most dysfunctional children are dysfunctional because they are lacking the kind of love they want to receive. Your perception of how you should love your children is not absolute. And when I say it's not absolute, I mean that it is not only through your model of the world that you should see things. If you do not understand how they want to be loved, then you're going to be cheating them and making them lose that sense of self, and you'll be giving room for abuse and other things and making it impossible for them to approach you when they have challenges.
You're listening to Lagos Talks on Smooth 98.1. Stay with us. The conversation continues.
You can see how passionate I am about
I know. Why is it possible that someone who didn't necessarily have childhood trauma can still, as an adult, become suicidal?
Yeah, they can. But the chances are from the research. Okay. I always like to go back to research because I'm obviously trying to be a thought leader in trauma recovery space. So I tend to listen to research a lot. I read a lot of research works on that. And what we have seen is that if you're 3 years old right now, you're traumatized.
Wow.
Yes, because let me tell you, notice there's a generation, there's something they call complex trauma. Complex trauma is almost like it's passed down. So what trauma does, it changes your DNA.
Okay.
And DNA, don't you pass it on to your children?
Absolutely.
Do you understand? So it's like you're not healing. It's not even only about you.
Yeah.
It's also about the children that you're bringing into the world. So you continue the cycle. So if your parents had been traumatized and they did not work on themselves, it means that you have trauma as well. And if that trauma is not worked on in the way that they parent you, so that's why 3, because from 3, the child starts to become aware. Yeah. And if you are not being parented, I had a recent case of a child, a 4-year-old whose father shuts her up. She wants to cry. He'll say, if you cry. So think about it. She's already traumatized.
Right.
She's just 4.
Yeah. So she's gonna grow up believing that, oh, you can't cry, you can't show emotion, you can't really express
I have to
yourself.
suck it in. If I don't suck it in, I'm going to be beaten up.
Yeah.
We have cases where parents beat up their child. A child that was beaten up, he gasped for breath. What kind of disciplining is that? And that's just why you saw me hammering on parents. Because the parenting, the way we are parenting children in Africa. See, I'm not against beating a child when necessary, but I'm against abuse.
Right.
There's a
Because it's
borderline
very
between
easy to
discipline
cross
and
that line. Yeah, true. Is that not what led to that little boy dying in a secondary school? I spoke about this yesterday. The teacher flogging the boy, and like, how do you flog someone till someone
anger.
dies?
Anger.
Wow.
Anger, because when you're angry, you're blinded.
Right.
You're not seeing. And some people have anger issues they don't even realize because rage.
Right.
It's like when anger takes over
So
them.
is anger like that kind of rage now? Is it like temporary insanity?
Yes.
Oh wow.
No. Some people have anger that when they're angry, just stay away from them. Because and the funny thing, once they've done it, it will just come down.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And then they're just like, what did I just do? But the harm has been done, the damage has been done.
Dang. And I don't know if it's maybe because people are now understanding mental health a lot more. But years ago, you didn't really hear of people taking their lives. Is it that they weren't, or it was just
times did you hear that? Oh, someone died. We don't know. Mysterious. There was always a lot of cover up, hush hush. The hush hush culture has been in Africa for so long, and that's why we struggle with vulnerability. We were taught to suck it in. Think about it.
Yeah.
Suck it in. You have if you ever had dysmenorrhea, dysmenorrhea is that abnormal menstrual pain.
Okay.
They'll tell you, oh, your mothers did this.
Yeah.
Comparing people, shaming them for what they're going through. Oh, look at that person. His K-leg. How many people have that kind of shame? Oh, who will marry you?
Yeah.
It's like, how did you get there? And look at it. There is nobody who is well loved, well treated, who ends up that way.
Yeah.
Except if they are just, really badly behaved. Some people are entitled.
Wow.
So we can now separate, like, okay, there's entitlement and there is abuse. There's childhood trauma. But in a lot of cases, even entitlement, is that not abuse? It is a parent overindulging their child.
That is true. So they grow up thinking I should always get everything. Yeah. All right, we're going on. That was Emily Sunday with Brighter Days. You're listening to the Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. We're talking about the rising cases of suicide in Nigeria. Our special guest this morning is Aishah Adams. And let us know if you have any questions or any comments as well. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. And right, you can also give us a ring, 014489 That is the number to call. We're streaming live, so you can catch the live stream up on our YouTube. And Aisha and I were having conversations off air, but those conversations are on the live stream as well. So it's a good idea to keep up with the live stream as well if you can. And if you can't at this point, you can always go back and watch the live stream because there's some important conversations that go on all around. So Aisha, we're speaking about this high rate of suicides in Nigeria. A few years ago, the then President Buhari signed this Mental Health Act into law. But you also wonder, as Nigerians or as Africans, have we come to a point where we truly regard mental illness as any other illness that would evoke empathy, like malaria or something? Do we accept it?
I don't think we're there yet. I think there's still a lot of sensitization and but more importantly, open-mindedness on the part of the people receiving the information. Because if the health professionals speak from now till tomorrow, if people are not willing to be open-minded about listening and understanding what we're saying, then we would really not move forward. But I noticed that there is still this well, I don't know what to call it, but it's like a resistance to accept that mental health has come to stay. And people say things like, I was having a conversation with someone and person's like, but many years ago we weren't talking about mental health. And my answer is, many years ago we weren't talking about cancer. How many people have died from cancer that we didn't know was cancer? You know how they'll say like, oh, it's village people.
Right.
And is it really village people, or is it that the person truly had cancer? They'll be like, oh, the person's chest started swelling, or this thing started swelling. Oh, it looks like someone sent something to the person. That was because we didn't have the knowledge enough to handle what it was that we were seeing. The moment we were better informed, We started to diagnose correctly, right? That's what happened. And so with mental health, because we have a culture of ignoring emotions, we do not, and mental health, emotional health, they're very linked. And so we struggle with the idea that we're human. I say that because we like to act like we're robots.
Right.
It's like, you know what? You're not supposed to feel. So what do people say when they come to someone grieving? The person just lost her husband. She just lost her father. You're like, don't cry. And I'm like, really? That's what is that your way of supporting? What does the person's tears, what does it do to you? It makes you uncomfortable. And because you're uncomfortable, a person is supposed to suck up their pain for you. And so it's really how we were raised. We were not raised to nurture emotions. And the truth of the matter is that with more research, we are seeing that there is a big connection between emotional health issues and physical health issues. Think about coronary heart disease, it links back to emotional health. Think about even cancer. Research has connected emotional health, mental health challenges to cancer. The more you are a person who suppresses things that happen to you, you sweep it under the carpet, you keep it inside, you don't tell anybody, no release, because emotion, we're a pack of oscillating emotions. It's almost like when you have to, visit the restroom. If you are unable to use the restroom for a day, 2 days, you're going to be worried. And that's the exact way you should be worried when you do not have an outlet for your emotions, because over a period of time, it starts to store up toxins in your body and it could become cancerous. So what we're saying is we're saying that people need to be more um open-minded to the conversations around mental health, because it's not a new thing. We have always been people that had emotions and that have a brain. We we prioritize physical health over everything else, because it's like, so long as I can move, then it's
Right.
fine. But what if you are moving and you're a moving dead person? How many people have just been shoved mistakenly and it has led to their death? It wasn't the show. It was that there were already things in them that had, probably they had hypertension and hadn't gone for checkup, but it wasn't showing on them. So they thought that they were fine. So what I'm saying is that it's about time that we started to really pay attention to our emotional and mental health, because it actually does matter.
All right, thank you, Aisha. We're speaking with Aishah Adams. Aisha is a therapist, she's a coach, and she's a counselor. We're going on to the phone lines. Good morning. Good morning. All right, give us a ring back. You know the number 0144899981. And please, when you call, do turn the radio off so we don't have that feedback that prevents us from hearing you. 0144899981. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. Now, Aisha, when it comes to seeking for help, it does seem like a lot of people are not too sure of where to turn to. Now, some may, okay, you know what? I'll hold that thought and go back to the phone lines. Good morning. Very well, thank you. Name and location, please. Okay, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Frank, for calling and sharing your thoughts. And Frank raises a point. People just say, oh, that person is mad. Or maybe for the people who are overly religious or misguided, they say, oh, maybe that person is possessed. It's an evil spirit or a demon that is in that person. But that person just has an illness.
Yes. I think being very religious also contributes to some of the challenges we have in mental health, because we move the spiritual way, and I'm a very spiritual person, so I don't have any problem with prayers. But when you have malaria, you'll pray, but you will still got use medication. So can you as well, visit the hospital, or speak to a mental health professional when you find that you're not feeling good in your emotions or in your mental state? It's about time. Everyone listening, if there's anything you can start to do, it's that you start to normalize conversations around mental health. Someone says, I'm feeling depressed, do not turn a deaf ear. Immediately pay attention, because some people, it's just that once you would hear them, and the next thing you hear, this person is dead.
Mm. Now, that term depression, I was having a conversation with a friend about this, and he said that's term is used so loosely in Nigeria. So someone is upset, they're having a bad day, they say, I'm depressed. Someone maybe is supposed to be at a function by 7, they're stuck in traffic, they get there at 9, they say, I'm depressed. So he says that, and this is his opinion, that sometimes, and a lot of time, people are just not depressed. Maybe they're upset, maybe they're broke, maybe they're angry. How can, you as an individual, someone is telling you, okay, I'm depressed. How can you filter through the noise to be certain that this person is really depressed or it's just a temporary feeling of unease that they're going through?
I think at the least you give them a listening ear. A person says I'm depressed. It's sign that the person is even willing to say something, because most people would be depressed and would not say anything, and you just hear stories later. So I think at the minimum you give them the opportunity to. But I think the second thing I would like to say is emotional intelligence classes. I say that it is compulsory that people start to take classes in emotional intelligence. There's so many avenues where you can actually do that now. So many people go online, search for emotional intelligence classes and take it. And I know we did a lot of discussions
Yes.
around this last year. And I say this because it's when you're emotionally intelligent, you start to understand that um there are ways you relate to people in certain spaces. You understand that there are different labels to different emotions. One of the things I do when I have a class, one of my classes, Smash or Gold, when I teach the class, one of the things we do is just exploring the different emotions, helping people come to the realization that, what, it's not just one thing. Like it's not just anger. Like people have very short, few words in their vocabulary to describe their emotions. And the reason is because, again, remember I said we are not taught to explore emotions. When we were growing up, who told you about emotions? Nobody. You had to figure it out. So it's like you don't know what word. You have just 2, 3 words: angry, sad, happy. And happy, how many times do we even use happy?
That is a very interesting point, because you hear people say, I'm frustrated, I'm stressed, I'm exhausted, but how many times do you really hear people just say, I'm happy?
And our lack of happiness is because we're very material focused, because there's actually a lot to be grateful for. I say that one of the easiest ways you can start to find happiness is not in basing your happiness on things, but on yourself. And it's to look in yourself and say, what do I have to be grateful for? In one of my books, I actually wrote something along the lines of, if you only woke up tomorrow with only the things that you were thankful for today, what would you wake up with?
Let's ponder on that, and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. Stay with us. It's Lagos Talks and Smooth 98.1.
That was nice. Nice, nice, nice.
Sorry?
That was nice.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm like, wow, let's take that. Because what you said, that thing, how many times do we really hear people express their happiness? Because sometimes when people are scared of expressing their happiness because it might make another person uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Okay, it's like, what makes you happy? So I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and the person says, oh no, but I don't think. I said, you've never been happy? Okay. And I said this, just this, I said this.
Yeah.
And person says, oh my God. Oh my God. So I will probably not have woken up with anything. I said, exactly.
Wow.
So it's like backtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Start becoming grateful.
Yeah.
Start understanding that happiness is not hinged to that career, that husband.
That is true.
In fact, that's the reason why we're having relationship issues. Maybe that's where we shouldn't go. Because you hear someone like, oh, why are you trying to get married? He's my better half. Okay, so that means you're not complete.
You were half.
So that he will go.
And why do you give that responsibility to someone else?
Oh, I need to have you.
Because that's like,
what should your the response? It's an unfair thing.
Yeah.
You haven't figured yourself out. You're expecting somebody else to figure you out.
Wow.
Figure out your happiness. Come on.
That's impossible. That's a recipe for unhappiness, actually.
Do you understand? So when you start to see that happiness is not in the things that you have, but in the opportunities that you have, you start to find more reasons to be grateful and happy. Because gratitude will help you cultivate that happiness. So you start to like, oh my God, I'm actually fortunate. One of the projects we run in the NGO, my street kitchen, every time we go to a different location, if I went there sad, I promise you I go there feeling full.
Wow.
You know, full. I'm full because every problem I came there with had disappeared. It's just that I have a different perspective. There's a shift in how I am thinking. And I'm like, oh my God, I thought that I had it bad. God, I am sorry. God, please forgive me for my ingratitude to all the favors that you have given to me. So it's not that we do not have things to make us happy. It is that we are basing our happiness on things that will not actually give us that.
Yeah. Because, so when you now get those things, exactly, then there is nothing. And you realize, wait, so that was actually not it. Wow.
So you are sad because you don't have a car. Are you able to move around in cars? Yes. Some people never bought cars, but they live the happiest lives.
That's true.
Give yourself grace. Give yourself grace.
That's true.
The grace to be happy.
Man.
The grace to be thankful. The grace to see that there is more to your life than the material things that you base it on.
Yeah. This thing you said about people not being able, very limited vocabulary to actually express emotion, it makes so much sense.
Sorry, hold on. Someone will say something.
Do you want a pen? Okay. Do you want me to reduce this?
Yes, we can definitely. Yes, so social media has contributed because people look at, other people's lives and think that it's picture perfect. How many people, put on their social media the days that they are drinking Gary or the day that they are hustling, except that the label they're trying to, sell.
That's true.
So I agree with you. Social media has definitely contributed to the increase in suicide.
There was someone, this was about maybe 2019 or 2020, someone committed suicide, maybe one of these popular celebs. And my co-anchor and I at the time were talking, and I'm like, man, but he always looked so happy. And he looked at me, he's like, Zibby, people don't post pictures when they're sad.
They come out into public to make you think that they're happy. And it's not that they even want to do that sometimes. It's just like they have to keep up appearance. How many celebrities are really happy? There are people that are happy, but there are those who are not. But they cannot show that they are unhappy.
Right.
Because the society expects them to measure up to a certain standard. So when I hear people say things like, when I just entered the Hummer Jeep like this, my life has changed. Same good. Yes, your life has definitely changed because you now have more responsibility
to take care of that car. Yes. All right, we're going on. Lift your spirit. Got your back. All right, that was Aloe Black with Lift Your Spirits. And that is something that someone somewhere who is struggling probably wants to hear. Just a kind word. Now, because of the kind of society that we live in, and this is not just exclusive to Nigeria, it's everywhere. As human beings, some people can be overly harsh with criticism, they can be unsupportive. And sometimes people who are struggling in their own way find that they might need to pick on someone else just to give themselves a little bit of a boost to make themselves feel better. It happens. It happens in families, it happens in workplaces, it even happens in religious sections and spaces as well. So the question today is, why do we keep having this increased number of people deciding to take their lives. There is a lot of awareness about it, or maybe not enough, but there is a lot of conversation going about it. People are now trying to be more receptive to the idea, but still people are taking their lives. Does it mean that the people who need this help the most are not getting it, Aisha?
Maybe they aren't. And there could be, a number of factors. It could be because they can't afford it. It could also be because, and when I say they can't afford it, because you don't really have government, incentives for those kinds of healthcare things, and the healthcare workers need to eat too. So there has to be a balance. Because I know sometimes people will reach out to you and say, you know what, I need to onboarding. But then the health worker is thinking, you know what, I have bills to pay. The moment I take you on, it means I can't take somebody else on. But when I have opportunity to help anyone, someone calls me and say, or someone reaches out and say, I'm feeling suicidal, I usually try to at least detone the bomb, because I see like a bomb. Like if I do not detone this bomb, it could go off anytime, and I can act like I don't care, but then what if it hits me later? So I'm more from a place of, okay, you know what, I can offer that as a support service. So I would say that, some people can afford it, some people do not even know where to go. They're like, you know what, who do I meet? Who do I speak to? Where do I, so perhaps, those of us in that profession need to be louder with what we're doing. We need to talk more, be willing to introduce ourselves in different spaces and say, I'm a therapist, I'm a coach, I'm a counselor, I do this, I do that. We need to be more vocal in that. And I think that, the people, family, friends, we need to become more receptive of conversations around mental health. Don't say, oh, it's the new slogan. Oh, it's a Gen Z thing. Oh, it's a, like, come on. In fact, we should thank, if you say it's a Gen Z thing, we should thank them for being vulnerable enough to take ownership of the fact that they need support. Because the older generation would condemn those kinds of things. And you talked about criticism earlier. And a lot of cases of people that have low self-esteem, that had, issues, mental health, trauma issues and stuff like that, actually goes back to emotional abuse when they were children. We don't talk about childhood trauma enough, about so many things that we do that caregivers do to their children. When we went offline, we're talking about caregivers that are so harsh with their children, and you say it's discipline, and honestly I say there is a thin line between discipline and abuse. And I think that parents need to understand that, although you have the authority to raise them, you should be empathetic in your raising these children, and remember that you were once a child, and ask yourself, would I love myself? Like, would I love me if I was the child to me? So it's like, if you are the child to the kind of parent that you are right now, would you love you?
Right.
And just think about it. Another thing I would say, with respect to perhaps reasons why people do not are not as aware about mental health opportunities, is that I think people are very capital focused. So people are like, oh, if it's not business, then I'm not talking about it.
Wow.
But I say to you that if you actually want to thrive if you thought you were doing well in business, I promise you, you're not even doing half as much as you would do when you have mental stability. The reason, what is in between you and making that money, what is in between you and having that healthy relationship, what is in between you, goes back to nurturing your emotions. Again, emotional intelligence classes, super important. In fact, I would say that it needs to become a thing that we do not only in schools, but it becomes like, in fact, before you get married, religious institutions should insist that people start to do that, because we will have healthier relationships, healthier community, people that are treating themselves better when we become more aware on how to manage our emotions effectively.
Right, we're speaking with Aishah Adams. Aisha is a therapist, a coach, and a counselor, speaking about the rising suicide rates in Nigeria. Get in touch with us. WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. Phone number to call is 0144 89981. We're going on to the phone lines. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good, good morning, Saji. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Mental health sometimes cannot be seen anything. It's only through the rural area of that part. But only at the issue, like Aisha mentioned, she said the religious message was not fanatical. I believe, or I'm suggesting, that one belongs. either to a cultural or social or a religion, where you participate up to. Like me, if I call somebody, I can notice a change in the person's body. And I will tell him, hold on, what? I will ask. Your voice is not the same. I used to understand or hear your voice. What is that? Then I will say, please, now we see so that we can discuss eyeball to eyeball instead of us. Because now, there's any change in that particular person behavior. You go around and display the person. So we should look at all the issues, not just monetary or support. If we need to support, yes, but that aspect of good behavior of somebody changes no work and how to fight discuss with that person and get with that person in a way that is that for fighting part of the short of damage. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your contribution. I actually agree with him too.
All right, thank you, Soji. And what he said, the need for people to join or build relationships with people, because sometimes, there's this phrase, family is not just who is related to you by blood.
Yes.
So some people are unfortunately not blessed to have that support system in the family. There are other ways that they can actually build that, like you spoke about the cultural groups and all.
I completely agree. I think that I always tell people, like, go in search of your people, and your people are not always family. And when we read about this, the story of Joseph in any of the scriptures, you'd see that his family was not necessarily his people. So even the scripture points to that, it alludes to that. So I think that it's important that we find our people. The people, your people are people that you're comfortable around. You can let your guard down with. You don't have to always, wear your armor. If you have to wear your armor around people, then perhaps they're not your people. So go in search of them. Where are you comfortable? Where can you, voice your thoughts? Where you feel loved and stuff like that. And I think that it's really important that we start to build community. Community is the future. If you really want to grow.
Aisha, it just feels like we've barely scraped this conversation.
Of course, there's a lot to say about suicide, about emotional and mental health. There's a lot, self-awareness. There's just so much to talk about. Really.
Absolutely. So we're gonna have to ask you back again because I feel like these things are now in our faces and we can't ignore it anymore.
Yes.
We did speak about how culturally sometimes we're taught to hide things and just not speak about them. But I think that era has passed.
Has it really?
Or it
Because
should have
when
passed.
it's supposed to have, because we knew how we felt when we were told to stuff things down. But come on, it's still there. A person is in fact, it was a conversation I had, I had a talk, I think last week, and I was talking about how a lady is going through infertility issues and she's not allowed to talk about it publicly because she'll be shamed. Or she's having miscarriages and she has to go hush hush because how dare you talk about that? Don't you know you're making people feel uncomfortable? Really? What if what she's saying is going to help somebody else? So I think that we are still very much in the not embracing vulnerability stage. And I think that if we start to embrace vulnerability, then we won't even feel the need to shame others.
Now we're almost out of time. In about a minute, are there things, and we spoke about how healthcare is very expensive. And for mental health care, it doesn't seem like the government, yes, that bill has been signed, but there isn't a clear strategy. So are there things that people can do when they are struggling for themselves?
I would say top on my list will be self-care. It's important you care for yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So care for yourself in the way that fills your own cup. What do you love? How do you love? How do you want to be loved? Instead of waiting for someone to love you the way you want to be loved, how about you start to love yourself that way? So self-care is anything that builds you up. What are the things that make you happy? So if you're listening to this, I want you to ask yourself, what are 3 things that makes me happy? Think about it. Not makes somebody happy, makes other you that fills you up, healthy habits that makes you happy, and start to do them. Schedule self-care like you schedule your appointments because it's important. Because if you are not whole, how would you be able to serve fully? And you can notice when you're stressed because you start to snap, you start to do, funny stuff. And like Soji said earlier, he said that, it's not only when you're exhibiting it, like mental health is not always obvious. In fact, there are so many cases of people that are suicidal that you're seeing them, they are saying things, they're smiling. See, not everyone who is smiling all the time is okay. So, be empathetic, like he said, So that's self-care will definitely be number one. Number two would be, I always talk about journaling. I know people are still struggling. We just talked about people struggling with vulnerability. So you do not have an outlet for your emotions. Writing it in a book, giving it an outlet, it just frees you up. Yeah, and you're like, oh, and some people, and then definitely therapy. You'll be like, oh, how will I just go and sit to someone that has another problem? We all have blind spots. And I will even say that, I always say to people that, if you seen a therapist or a coach who doesn't talk about seeing a therapist and coach, you should run away, because how are they also feeling their own cup? So it's important that you check in with your mental state from time to time, that you have a therapist you go to, that you have a coach that you speak to, that you speak to a counselor down and then. And when you talked about, health being expensive, the question I ask you is that what is the cost of your life? What is the cost of your life? You can buy a dress for 50K. You can buy a dress for 100,000 naira. But then they say come for therapy. That is 100,000 naira. And you're like, that's so expensive. But the dress wasn't expensive. Really, what are your priorities? And when you start to prioritize your health, you would see that it will even improve your quality of life, and even the money that you're chasing and all of the things will come to you easily. Another thing I would like to say is that it's important that you have good friends, good groups. We talked about it earlier, but then just reinforcing that, because community is important. The kind of community you belong to is important. And community doesn't have to be many people. It could be one person that you're comfortable with, sitting down and just talking to. Have that one person. It will really improve your quality of life. And yeah, I think let's.
All right. Okay, Aisha. Would love to share contact details. We've gotten some messages, and people want to know how they can get in touch.
Okay, on Instagram at Aishah AISHAH_Adams. Same on TikTok, I think. And on Twitter, Sidiko Aish at, yeah, I think Aisha_Adams on most platforms.
Okay.
And you can send an email to me, me@aishahadams.com. Those are ways you can reach me.
All right. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Aisha, for being here. Health is wealth. I mean, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of those who are grieving as a result of these suicides that have, taken loved ones away. It's also very important. That Latin phrase, mens sana in corpore sano, a sound mind in a sound body. It all works together. That is it for Lagos Talks this morning. Do stay with us. 1 hour. Yes, I'm with you up until 11 a.m.
58.1.
Are we done?